Chapter 40. A new problem made itself heard on our very first day. I was hanging up the curtains when I heard the noise, a roaring sound coming from Scouter's Mountain. Corey said, "It sounds like motorcycle racing." Sig came in enthused. "Guess what? Motorcycle gangs are riding up on Scouter's Mountain." When Arlo came by, he complained, "The noise reverberates all over the valley." I shuddered. We were practically in the backyard of Scouter's Mountain. Shortly after that occurred the most spectacular event in the valley since we'd moved there, and Corey and I missed it completely. We couldn't figure out why. Here we were, less than a block away with our bedroom window facing that direction. Why hadn't we heard the shrieking sirens? Could it be that our ears had become so deadened to noise from the bikers on Scouter's Mountain? I couldn't have been sleeping very soundly. Freya and her cousin Jackie had left on a trip to Germany. A trip that troubled me far more than just a spontaneous vacation of two young girls. We first learned of the spectacular event early in the morning while Corey and I were eating oatmeal. Sig and Eric burst noisily through the back door, wide-eyed and animated. They had spent the night in their sleeping bags on the deck of the new house, still under construction. "Golly, that was some fire," they exclaimed. "What are you talking about?" Corey asked. "Thompson's barn burned down. We could see the flames shooting up in the middle of the night." Their wild gestures finally convinced us to go to the front room window. It was as if a bucket of cold water had fallen from the upper doorposts. The scene we'd become accustomed to had changed dramatically. Thompson's old white house still stood there, but instead of the barn looming in the background, there were only blackened timbers etched against the early morning sky. Corey and the boys were out the door in no time. I watched them run down the road. I dashed to the bedroom, got into my clothes, and ran out. Shortly, Corey was back. I followed him and the boys to the barn and watched them throwing ropes, buckets, and miscellaneous tools into the truck. "They're trying to keep the animals rounded up, but they don't have much to work with," Corey explained. My mind was filled with numerous questions. The most pressing was, what would they do about their milking schedule? How many times Arlo had told me about the importance of punctuality and how nervous Jersey cows got with any small disturbance. What a big disruption this fire would cause. It was a long, confusing day, as were the days that followed. Folks were coming and going. Everyone wanted to do whatever they could, but so many didn't know how to help. Or what was the difference between helping and just being in the way? For the first time, Arlo had no time to socialize. He was often on his tractor. One day I saw him heading up the slight grade beyond his house. We watched as he skirted the orchard and drove up almost to his fence line. He began scooping the earth. "He's digging a pit," Sig said, "to bury stuff that got ruined in the fire." The next day I saw his tractor coming out from amongst the scorched timbers, dragging an object that looked like a large log. Suddenly, the awful truth dawned on me. It was the carcass of one of the cows. Within the next few days, he repeated the trip 7 times. My heart ached for him and Jean, but especially for Jean. I knew how she was suffering even while she was having to continue dealing with the care of those surviving animals. We offered to house some of their cattle at our barn. During Olav's stay, he had done considerable cleaning and organizing and had repaired some of the stalls. But Jean didn't want her cows out of her sight. Within a week, a builder down the road announced that the neighborhood was going to have a barn raising. Everybody pitched in, foundations, framing. Corey loaned his equipment and helped to haul supplies. Throughout the whole time, the noise from the motorcycles seemed to get worse. It appeared that more of them came out every day, roaring up the road, turning off into the driveway opposite Arlo's, and racing up through the trails they had cut out on the hillside. It disturbed the cows. It disturbed all the residents on the east side of the valley. What could be done? Folks suggested contacting the landowner, but we knew that the property had been sold to a wealthy woman who lived in Louisiana, or somewhere in the South, and what would she care? In all the conversations of the folks gathered around, it seemed that everyone had a story about a barn fire somewhere, including Corey, whose family had endured the pig barn fire in Norway. When Corey's father bought property across the street from their home in Norway on Elgeseter Gate, raising pigs was not his primary intention. His plan was to demolish the old, abandoned pig house and use the lumber for greenhouses to grow flowers and vegetables. Mother heartily agreed. But his neighbor, Hoggensley, argued that raising pigs would be more profitable than producing crops, and would certainly be a good companion venture. "Yeah, fertilizer to food." Mother disagreed. Raising hogs, she said, was degrading, especially for a graduate of Sweden's leading horticulture college, and for his wife, a ship steward's daughter, raised in genteel surroundings, who worked in a floral shop making corsages and had been wed in the famous Nidaros Cathedral. She had another reason for tearing it down. It's a terrible fire trap for children playing there. And being outside the city limits, we're not protected by the Trondheim Fire Department, Corey's father added. What does that mean? Corey asked. Father elaborated. It means that if we have a fire, the city's fire engines won't come and put it out. That's crazy. Why wouldn't they? Corey asked. Because we don't pay city taxes. It was a time when many German ships were docking at the harbor. Some of them were under suspicion of charting the Norwegian coastline. The crews were often seen in town, apparently trying to seduce the Norwegian girls, and snapping up all the pork from the markets, not flowers, but pork. Father recognized opportunity when it knocked and stalked the old building with pigs. Corey's mother detested the whole business, the smells, the sounds, and even the crude hired help. She claimed they were useless, that they slept on the job, and even, it seemed, she hated the fact that the venture turned out profitable, as Haagensley had predicted. It just goes to show how much those Germans love their bellies, she said. Her biggest problem was that, despite her criticisms, she relished the pails of blood that Father brought home for making blood sausage, a popular food in Norway, and the heart and brains, a treat, and the meat which she salted down for their own use. In spite of that, she refused to step foot in the building and kept the children away. Corey was uninterested in the process called slopping hogs, but he was captivated by the butchering. He would creep into the steam-filled room where large tubs of hot water reeked with the awful smell of blood and guts. He'd watch wide-eyed as spattered figures wrestled with the terrified animals, until finally, overcome by nausea, he would have to rush out to ponder the cruelty of fate. His mother always discovered his truancy and issued dire warnings. Someday you'll get skinned, just like those pigs. Her prediction came true one cold morning when Father sent word from the barn with one of his hired men that a sow had died, and he needed hot milk to feed the piglets. Mother heated the milk and then, against her better judgment, handed Corey the bucket. The road was icy, the bucket was heavy, and clouds of steam stung his hands. He scooted along as fast as he dared, but at the crest of the road, he lost his balance. He and the bucket went flying. He screamed as his legs were scalded. Mother came running, and when his clothes were pulled off, his skin came too. Mother forgot about the plight of the piglets and rushed Corey to the doctor. Father concluded, "Keep him home. I can't afford him as a helper." That was not the end of the troubles. One night the pig house caught on fire. As Father had predicted, the fire department didn't come to help. When it appeared that there was no hope, Father and his men opened the gates and chased all the pigs out. For several days, Corey and his friends chased the elusive pigs. Few were ever caught. After the loss of his business, Father decided to take the family to America. His wife objected, but Father left anyway and took 2 of his wife's sisters with him. While they were on the high seas, they received news of the declaration of World War I, and Father sent a telegram telling his wife to sell everything and catch the next boat to America. She complied. She knew whom to blame. On the night of the pig house fire, one of the lazy hired men was sleeping on the job, she said. "You sure he was sleeping on the job," Father would say. "It was time for the sows to bear, and we always had a man sleeping in the pig house den. Whatever for. So the sows won't killed or young." That gave Mother the last word. "Yeah, I always suspected that of pigs." When Thompson's barn was finished, it didn't blend into the landscape like the old one had. It looked more like a warehouse than an ancient landmark. To Jean, it was like a foreigner, like the city folks who were swarming out to the valley in increasing numbers. Like those bikers on Scouter's Mountain. We now had one of the few old barns left in the valley. This seemed to give Corey the realization that barns were for more than storage areas. He went out and bought a beautiful purebred Hereford cow and her calf. She was such a sweet animal. We all loved her and her calf from the start. But Eric was worried. He had been deeply affected by the fire. "I hope our barn doesn't burn down." "It won't," Corey said. "It will blow away in a hurricane." "We don't have hurricanes in Oregon," I said.